Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with reformed mobster and memoir writer Aiden Gabor. He is a former associate of a well-known crime family. He worked undercover for more than a decade as a confidential informant for the Department of Justice, serving as a police officer in undisclosed locations. He is responsible for helping the DOJ arrest and convict more than a dozen high-ranking police officers and politicians. He has written one of the best books about the mob and has now found peace in his faith. In 2020, Aiden was diagnosed with ALS. These days, he embraces his faith, good fortunes, and lives with his wife, who happens to be his hero. Listen to this life-altering story.
It's great to meet you, sir. Thank you for taking a minute out today.
No problem.
So so first and foremost, you got obviously a very interesting life, a very interesting lineage that's led up to right now. And my first question for you that really kind of affected all of us as human beings. If we look at the calendar, 4 years ago, the pandemic began. How did you get through that time period? How did that change you?
The pandemic, getting stuck in the house and all that stuff, it affected me, I wasn't feeling well. It's one of those ones you don't know why you're not feeling well. And I thought, maybe I had COVID, but I never got it till the end of it. And that was about the time I found out I had ALS, so I kind of figured out why I was feeling like shit. But other than that, I got through it just family and faith. I started reading on the Baha'i faith, and, back then I was having nightmares and a lot of issues with stuff coming back. And my wife, Sabrina, I would be throwing her on the ground. I would be screaming and I don't even know I'm doing it. But just these night terrors. And so a friend of mine, Sam, said, he flew out to see me. He's like, you got to figure this out. You got to figure out what's going on. And, going back, that's when we started, during the pandemic is when we started the book. And it was started off as a therapy. And that's kind of gave me something to do. But it brought out a lot of demons I had that I guess you can say locked away that I wish I could never, that you don't want to remember. But it did help me in the long run. It helped me, I think, came out spiritually to understand up to Baha'i a lot more at that point.
Before we get into the backstory, what was the ultimate catalyst? As you mentioned, there's a lot of heavy stuff that you've had to process in your life. But what was the ultimate catapult for you to get to a point where you said, I need to put this story down. I need to deal with it. This is a choice I'm making.
When my second wife, who didn't really know much, knew some of and I just started having all these tears and stuff. And when I started, her and I had a long talk, and she figured something was up. And then my buddy Sam, he's the only person other than Don is the one that ever really knows about my whole story. And he sat there and he came down, the two of them kind of like an intervention, like what is going on here? And that's what the catalyst was that started it, was this intervention. It said, then we're going to do therapy. You need to talk to somebody. So I talked to them, kind of got it out, not willingly. And 90% of it, you get out to my wife. Then I haven't gotten everything out, and it's still processed. And then Sam's like, "Oh, you need to put let's do a book. Let's just do it. Let's see how it works." I'm like, I'm not putting all that shit in there. He says, "You know what? Put it the way you want it, how you want it shown." And the way the book came out is the way I wanted it.
The one thing about the mob mentality, my ancestors came from Italy, and my dad was full-blooded, and he looked like a character out of The Godfather. And I remember my dad used to always tell me, whenever we would talk about anything mob-related, because he watched The Sopranos and watched The Godfather and would watch those culture, films, but he always told me, don't ever piss in the river because you may have to drink out of it one day. And I always remember that there was never anything in him other than looking at it as art that he would ever revere. because it was just something that wasn't even fathomable. My question is, I wonder with some of these guys, because there seems like there's a moral compass that's in there somewhere. There seems like there's a level of morality, but it's almost as though they get in too far, they can't get out. What's kind of the mentality with some people that get wrapped up into that world? Why they stay in it and can't get out?
Well, you become a family. My dad was an associate with these guys, and even though he was 100% Hungarian, my dad, he had a full-time job, but he did stuff with them. And that started out with the family thing, because they would have dinners and all that. And it kind of drew me in. And the reality is I was a lot bigger than my father. I was probably 8-9 inches taller than my dad. And I was really big for my size. But the way it gets in there is it becomes a family. And, there is a respect thing. And there is morality as far as, my, mentor, Eddie, would always be, we're business. We're doing business, but we don't do drugs. One thing we don't do is drugs. And if you do drugs, you don't want to find, if you're doing it, we're going to fix it. If you're selling it, you don't want to find out what happens. That's all I'm going to tell you. Don't do it. We'll and I can't say the exact words that were stated, but he used to say, let the gangs or whatever do in their own neighborhoods. We'll keep ours clean. We'll keep ours protected. We'll work together. We'll make money off them when they sell, but we're going to do other things. And I think what happened, you get in there, and then when you get the respecting, and then, as you walk the neighborhoods, you got some power and respect. And I think the biggest thing I've learned to this day, I don't like being, if you disrespect me, I go ape shit. So I think you're right. It comes down to a respecting. I think with your father, it might be with him too. That's an Italian thing too, that respect is everything.
It certainly is, yeah. And if that gets crossed, it can get really bad. And I would imagine for somebody like you have a high level of moral integrity. You've gone through a lot. You've seen a lot. You're still standing. You're fighting ALS. So I'm wondering, who's been a hero? Who's been an inspiration that's made you have that level of integrity in your life up to this point?
Well, I'm going to be honest, as a kid, it was Eddie, but it was my mentor. But, as Ray said, he's the one that taught me respect for women. But, I'll be honest with you, it really kept my confidence is my Sabrina, my new wife. She's my little wife, but she supports me in everything. She doesn't downgrade me. And she pushes me to be the best I can every day. And, a lot of people say, come on, because that's your right. No, if you don't have a support, between her and Sam and my buddy Don, like Don, he was there with it. He saved my life a bunch. I saved his. It was more of a, I don't see him anymore. I really see Sam. My wife's the one that pushes me. I speak to my father now for a long time. We didn't speak for a very long time, over 10 years. And we've come back to, she's the one that basically, you need to go take care of your father. You need to go talk to him. And I'm going to be honest, it's my wife.
So I'm curious too, having ALS, having something heavy that you have to deal with physically, what kind of eye-opener is that for you in this life? With the things that you've seen and been through, how much does that alter the way that you approach things?
There was one point in my life, I was not afraid of dying. I didn't care. I didn't have any morals about dying, I don't know how I didn't die with all the stupid shit I got into. But after I found ALS and I found the Baha'i faith, I want to live. I want to live more to make the world a better place, because I was non-spiritual growing up. And I felt it. I used to joke I worked for the other guy. I would recruit for the other guy. And I didn't give a shit about anybody that, they believed in God, really. Okay. But, as I got along, moved along, the ALS and fighting all that, it's a spiritual thing that I figured, I'm ready for it, but I want to live as long as I can to make the world a better place, the best I can make from being, I didn't say I was the cesspool shit I've seen, but the stuff I've done, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't regret what I did. I regret some of the things that outcomes came, but everybody involved is not innocent. And, like I put in the beginning of the book, protect the names, places, and all things, to protect the guilty, because everybody's guilty that was in my life. There's really, really no innocence. And to this day, I'm very, very, the ALS, the spiritual side, and right now I started getting into a thing where I help with disabled young men and women, and when you talk to them every day, the joy and the non-racism, everybody's the same to them. I learn more from them, between them and the Baha'i faith, that I cannot. I can't imagine I was younger even thinking about.
My son is on the autism spectrum, and I've been in that special needs world. He's 19 now, and my son's my hero. The amount of things that he has to kind of process and go through. But there is that shield. When I go to Special Olympics events and I see these kids, they're literally just these beautiful creatures that just take it in. They don't get hung up. They don't get hung up on the traditional things that other people do. So I would think in that spiritual sense, if anybody doesn't believe in a higher power, hang out with those kids for a little while. You'll figure things out.
Oh, absolutely. And they're spiritual. And I love Special Olympics. I do a lot with them, and I enjoy the kids. I really do. I was never a huggy, feely guy. Okay. But everybody comes up to hug you, and the love that they bring, everybody's the same. There is no judgment, and I love that. And I wish I would have known that in younger years. And I think, God bless you with your son and all that, with everything, and you know what it's like, and you see how these kids are. And the spiritual aspect, you're right. That is, now I know, and that's why I want to try and stay around as long as I can and do whatever the doctors tell me, so I can help out as best I can.
Well, and I think that's the thing about your story. Just like with my son, the only thing I'm in control of is how much I can love him. And I think with your story, the thing that's unique is that you could have very easily not have done anything, not written a book, not tried to look at the bright side, not tried to embrace things that would be positive, but you've done the opposite. My question to you is, what kind of feedback have you gotten from people, life-changing things that have happened as a result of you coming out and sharing your story?
A lot of people said that, I really didn't want to write the book. And a lot of people come and said, thank you, that, you can be, bad, or you can come from doing bad things, and that, people said all positive with it. I put in there the trials I had with alcoholism and wanting to kill myself. I can tell you it was over 200 times. I had a 357 Magnum. I would put a Magnum round in there. I would spin the barrel, and I would pull it. And I recall over 200 times, if not more. And there had to be more with all the times I was drunk. And people come out, and a lot of veterans have said, you know what, the way you described it is how I feel. And I always tell them, there is somebody out there to support you. You get a support group. If I'll talk to you for hours. So you need to talk. I've been there, not what they went through. I can't tell you, I went through some of my own battles, but the outcome that you have somebody to support is there. And, same thing with law enforcement. One or two bad law officers make 100,000 look bad. And the way that the society is nowadays, they shit on the men and women in law enforcement. The same thing with men and women of the military. That there's somebody out there also that's stopping the corruption. And, I was part of the corruption, and I was at first not willing to stop the corruption, but as I got into it, I realized, you know what, this shit needs to stop. And, as a kid, I realized, getting older, these guys should be protecting, and they're not. And That's not the way it's supposed to work. And that's kind of, I've had a lot of people tell me they enjoy that part of the aspect, and they enjoy the part that, kind of hits them that, wow, I wouldn't expect this to go in the spiritual way it did. And I'm like, you can find it. If you find it, it gets in your heart, because when I found the Baha'i faith and I accepted it, I felt different. I felt like a whole person. And it just, it's an aha moment. I was sitting outside in the sun looking up, and it just the sun felt warmer. And that's the only description I could put with it.
Yeah, that's the thing I think that's so disheartening about the world of ours that look at the police the way they do. I mean, in other professions, for instance, I'm in IT. I fix rooms in a school district, a large one in the Kansas City area. And if one teacher makes a mistake, it doesn't reflect on everybody else. But unfortunately, in this modern society, it's like if there's one bad story that's illustrated on the news about a police department, it just reverberates through everybody. And it's such a bad thing, because there are so many good police officers. There's so many good people out there. I mean, I just can't even imagine. My wife did a drive. She drove with one of the cops about 2 months ago, and she was like, oh, my God, holy shit, you can't even imagine the things that these guys run into every single night. You know what I'm saying? And then they get all of the good ones, which is most of them, get all of this horrible feedback because of one person. It just doesn't make sense.
No, it does. And it's the old saying, these people that make the judgments, defunct this, do that, walk in my own shoes. Go do a ride along like your wife did. Go do it. And you'll see life differently. But these idiots will say, well, they did this. They set this up to be like this. No, the world doesn't revolve like that. That's not how they work. It's like the old saying, he came up to, bother me. He attacked me. Officers aren't out there to find you. They get called from another citizen to go look at you. Their job is to find out why you're there. You're not supposed to be there. And if maybe you need help. That's how, and people right away get that defensive. Well, you get defensive. Their job is to find out what's going on. They're going to get defensive, and, it sometimes never works out well. Just like back in the day when I went to crew, you're in the wrong neighborhood. As another crew came in, they were poaching. That never ended up well. We'd go find out, and they usually become assholes, and we can become bigger assholes. And I think that's the way it's got to be looked at. That they're not the bad guys. They're not there looking for you. Somebody else called them to be there, and their job is to protect the neighborhoods, to protect the laws of the country that we live in. And I'm going to go another way and say, just like this whole thing with the Palestinians, these people that are all like, oh, pro-Palestinian, okay, if some of these people they get a hold of, they're going to kill them right away. That's just the way they are. And they did something that's, ungood. Now, two wrongs don't make a right, but one started it, and that's how it's going to end up. But these people that have never lived are the ones that talk about communism and how this would be better. My parents came from a communist country during World War II when the Russians came in. And they were partisans. And the stuff my dad has said, the stuff your mother did is unbelievable. And I didn't know that till after she passed. And my mom used to scare me. Now I know why. But these people go live in a communist country for several months a year and see what you're thinking of the United States, or what you think of the laws of our country are now. And I think that might help, or not help, but make them change the way they feel.
Let me ask you this. When you look back on your life and all of the things that you've done and become, let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into an 18-year-old version of you. You could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on the life you've led, the wisdom you've gained. What advice would you give that young version of you?
I would say, look, you know what? You got your own path. You need to think, but you need to find something spiritually. You need to find something spiritually. Maybe, you know what, you can lead your path the way you are. Maybe go into help out in Special Olympics and see how the world is looked at through their eyes. But again, get a hold. I don't care if it's Jesus Christ, if it's or it's the Baha'i faith. I'll do Baha'i. But get some religion, sometimes spiritualism in your life. That will help you. Like my own self now, I say, hey, you know what? I want to tell you, there's 2 movies that I found. One's called The Gate, which is on the Baha'i faith, awesome movie, and the series The Chosen. I would tell them to go look at those 2. Just watch it and see what you think of everything. Then, you may be cynical. You may look at it as, then you may not be able to be helped, but think about what you're doing. And if you can make the world better, don't hustle. You don't have to hustle all the time. But again, you need to look at something spiritually.
So of all of the things that you've done and become and overcome in your life, what are you proudest of?
I am proud about putting bad officers in prison. I am proud, especially my first one. And I'm proud of that. I am putting something out there that people can read and see that you can look at spiritually. Maybe something, maybe somebody will look, hey, maybe I should try this. Maybe if it helped him, maybe it can help me. Anybody. And that, some of the things you're going through, somebody else has been through. There's a lot of crazy shit out there, and you think you went through it. Well, I guarantee you someone else has went through it, and somebody else may have went through it harder, or maybe you went through a lot harder than I have. But at least it's getting somebody out there to think about.
So, at the end of the day, what do you want this story to be? What do you want your legacy on this planet to be?
I want to be that you can change, that, you can be somebody that would not be a positive for a world, that you can to look at the world. You can help against racism, because I was racist. I was, everybody. It wasn't just one. Everybody had a nickname. We called everybody something different, and that you can make a positive note on this life, and you can spiritually, and maybe, if you help out, you can make the world a better place.
If anybody wants to pick up the memoir, where's the best place to do that?
Amazon. You can do it Amazon. You got Kindle version. You got conflicting royalties. You can look up that. We have a conflictingroyalties.com, which will explain everything in the book in the different areas you can get it, because it's Barnes and Nobles. That you can get, and there's several other platforms that they can pick it up at.
May not be as old as others on this planet, but after 51 years, the one thing I do know is that the true mark of a human being is the evolution and the reckoning and finding a better path, and that's, I think, the epitome of your story. So I have a high amount of respect for you for stepping out there and putting your story out there and changing lives, and undoubtedly you're doing that. So thank you for taking a minute out today, and for the work you're doing, and continued success with everything.
It's an honor to be on your show. Thank you for inviting me. I think, I appreciate just anybody talking to about the book, and also if they're taking a positive out of it. And again, the honor is all me, sir.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.